Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider series, where I interview practitioners of corporate venturing. Today, I am so excited to have Jihong Kim from Samsung Ventures, who is going to share about Samsung and the way of corporate venturing. But let's start with your personal journey, Jihong. Could you please describe how you got into corporate venturing?
Sure, happy to share my story. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this call, to this interview. And I'm looking forward to sharing my stories and my perspectives and tell the audience, the listeners, a little bit about Samsung Ventures as well. So starting with myself, I studied EE, electrical engineering and computer science for my undergraduate degree at Berkeley. And I started my career as a software engineer. My first job was with a company called Lucent Technologies. At the time, around 2000, it was one of the big tech companies in the network equipment space. That was my first job. And then after that, I worked at a couple of startup companies as an engineer. So that's where I first got my taste of what working at a startup is like. And then I made a switch into a management consulting space, and I joined PwC, their consulting division, did a number of projects in Korea as well as in China. There was quite a change from working on developing code and testing software in a lab setting to going to client offices to meet them and discuss business issues. So there was quite a steep learning curve, and sometimes it was quite painful for me. Part of it was because I didn't really have the proper business management education. So then I looked at different MBA programs, but came back to Berkeley to get the business degree, and then came out of Berkeley to join a hedge fund based locally here in San Francisco, global long-short equity strategy. I worked there for a couple of years as a research analyst, looked at different sectors and different companies of various sizes. Was fun for a while, and then I had a friend who used to work at Samsung Ventures at the time, and that was about 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. Samsung Ventures was expanding at the moment and had a couple of new big funds that they wanted to deploy strategically. And given my experience as an engineer, some technology knowledge as well as experience experience from management consulting and then financial services type of work that I've done, I thought venture capital would be a very interesting journey for me to take on at that point in time. And Samsung was another reason was Samsung. Which is a brand that's recognized globally, very big platform. A lot of companies that there are a lot of companies that want to work with Samsung. So was happy to jump on this platform and then been here since, primarily working with the consumer electronics, mobile, as well as the enterprise software businesses within Samsung, investing strategically for those business units, and now expanding a little bit beyond those scope, but we can get more into that later. And so, yeah, that's kind of the overview about my journey into CVC.
Very nice. And I think you're being humble because at Samsung Ventures, you've been promoted multiple times. Let's start with your background of engineering and then consulting. How much of that do you use today in your current corporate venturing investments?
I think quite a bit. If I didn't have that background as a software engineer, then I think it would have taken a lot more effort for me to just have basic understanding about what different software businesses do and their products. So it gives me at least a good starting point. It doesn't mean that, a number of years for me to have worked in engineering space, that doesn't give me a lot of how do I say it? So I still have to do a lot to learn their new technologies, AIs, and other software-related solutions. But it gives me a really strong foundation to start with. And then I think in terms of trying to understand the technology, it's quite helpful. On the management consulting side, I worked on a number of projects around sales and marketing and CRM at the time. And that gives me, again, a good foundation and good starting point to try to drill down into their businesses, how they run the sales and marketing operations. So those experiences actually helped me quite a bit in assessing their startups' businesses, their potential, and then in terms of working with them after we make the investment as well.
Very nice. And then you mentioned working for hedge fund as a research analyst. And here I'm actually very curious. What is similar in terms of discipline of research between a hedge fund and Samsung Ventures? And what is different?
Quite a lot of difference, also quite a lot of similarities as well. In terms of the different things, I think the key difference is the way we do deals. Here we have to basically have a direct conversation with management, talk about how we actually do the investment, what are the terms, do we take on a board seat or not, the valuation, that's all kind of set via negotiations. And because we're a strategic investor, we also talk about side letters containing some strategic terms on behalf of Samsung as well. On the public market side, doing transaction is fairly easy. You just go to your broker and then buy and sell at the market price. So transaction is not an issue. It's basically, what kind of position you take. You can actually take the opposite position as well. As you know, you can take a short position if you think a stock is going to fall in price over time. So it's more of a financial engineering as well as a lot of modeling and a lot of assumptions, a lot of Excel work. Not a lot of that as far as, when we make the investment especially into early stage companies, it's more about understanding the potential, the market, the team, their experience, and then understanding the technology. So there's some of that. Also, on the public equity hedge fund market side, you need to understand the market, the team, and then the product, the margin, all that. But I think the emphasis is a little bit different. It's basically a little bit less on the financial side, on the VC, as far as I can tell. A lot more on the financial models and those stuff on the public equity market. And the deal dynamics. I think that's the key difference.
Very nice. And clearly you work for big companies, but also startups. And when you were at the hedge fund, you were investing in a late stage. Then you moved to Samsung Ventures, early stage.
Yes.
What was a few surprises you had about investing early stage?
I think one of the surprises was coming into venture capital, I expected it to be quite different from investing in public market. Although, if you kind of look at it broadly, we're kind of both in the investment management space. But, private equity, venture capital, quite different from investing in public equity market. I think the difference is the risk you're taking is substantially high. And it's at a different level. So if you invest in the stock market, then you invest at certain price, and then if the price falls like maybe 10%, 20%, then you want to stop your loss, and then easy to get out. So from that perspective, there is liquidity risk. Once you get into a startup company, it's not easy to get out if you want to stop your loss. It's a lot of times it's binary. You get to make a lot of money from investing in a successful startup versus a lot of startup companies are not very successful either. So in which case you can lose 100% of your money. So that was quite surprising on the financial side. Another thing is, I think, because Samsung Ventures is a strategic investor, investing with a strategic rationale in your mind and thinking about how, to connect your portfolio company to the business unit, how to work with them more directly. That was something new that I haven't experienced before.
Very nice. And I'll ask a lot of questions about Samsung Ventures, but maybe we start about the CVCs of Samsung. As far as I understand, there are 3 of them. Can you give us a little of a high-level view between them and how they differentiate?
Sure. So perhaps maybe I can start with Samsung Ventures.
Of course.
And then give a little bit of overview about Samsung Ventures and then move on to our sister organizations like Samsung Next Ventures as well as Samsung Catalyst Fund. So Samsung Ventures has been around for a long time, over 20 years. It was set up back in 1999 as a corporate VC arm investing on behalf of Samsung family of companies. So Samsung Ventures was set up not as part of any particular business unit, but as an independent investment company. And then we have this GPLP relationship, which is very common in the VC industry. And our business units, they come in as LPs, so they provide the capital, and then we come in as a GP. Samsung Ventures is the GP to the fund that we manage, and then we charge management fees and carry to the fund. So that structure is quite similar and common to the VC industry. And the reason why Samsung Ventures was set up that way is because of the conglomerate structure of Samsung. So within Samsung, as many people know, there are many different operating companies in different sectors, including semiconductors, mobile phones, TVs, home appliance products, but they're also in battery solutions, display solutions, as well as shipbuilding and construction. The list goes on and on and on. So, it made more sense to set up an investment company, a separate entity that can invest on behalf of other business units within Samsung in a structure that's similar to the VC structure. And today, at a high level, I think we in terms of assets under management, we have around 2.5 billion under management, roughly speaking. And then in terms of our activities, we do about, I think, over $200 million a year globally. Bulk of that money is actually invested in the US for US-based startups. But we also have presence in Europe, in Israel, China, Japan, India as well. And then our main office is, for obvious reasons, in South Korea. And we also actively invest out of those regions as well. So collectively together, over $200 million, pretty consistently year over year. I think in terms of number of deals, maybe 80 to 90 deals, roughly speaking, per year. So we invest quite actively. I think we are one of the probably more active strategic investors and one of the larger strategic VCs as well in the space. And then another thing is we work with around 14 or 15 different business entities within Samsung. So our largest LP is Samsung Electronics, obviously. That's the biggest company within Samsung. And we do a lot of work with Samsung Electronics, but it's just part of Samsung Ventures activities. We also work with other companies like Samsung SDS, for example, Samsung SDI in the battery space, Samsung life insurance companies, Samsung construction companies, and Samsung Biologics, which is one of the newer addition to Samsung family of companies in the biotech and biodrug manufacturing space. So Samsung Ventures covers quite a broad scope of industries and investment opportunities. So that's Samsung Ventures. And then our sister organizations like Samsung Next and Samsung Catalyst Fund, they were set up about 10 years ago, roughly speaking, about 10 years ago. And they sit within Samsung Electronics, which is the largest company within Samsung. And Samsung Electronics, you can look at Samsung Electronics as largely two divisions of businesses. One is in the semiconductor space, and the other division would include mobile products, consumer electronics, and home appliance products. So it's two divisions. Each division is somewhat run separately, independently from the other, and they set up their own open innovation centers. And then the open innovation centers had multiple functions, including M&As, investments, partnerships, their own internal projects and incubation efforts. So the Open Innovation Center that was set up within the Semicon division of Samsung Electronics is called Samsung Strategy Innovation Center, or SSIC in short. And their investment arm is called Samsung Catalyst Fund. And their strategy have changed over time, but right now my understanding is they work very closely with the semiconductor division and invest in opportunities that's meaningful to the semiconductor division. Samsung Ventures, we also have a fund with the semiconductor division of Samsung Electronics. So we do have some overlap there. So we try to coordinate as much as possible. We have regular meetings with them to talk about deals, and then we don't want to be engaging similar companies at the same time. We try to coordinate internally. And Samsung, speaking about Samsung Next Ventures, so they're the investment arm of Samsung Next, which is the Open Innovation Center for the mobile consumer electronics part of Samsung. And just like SSIC, they have multiple initiatives around M&As, investments, and partnerships. So it's very similar to SSIC, but working with the mobile and consumer electronics part of Samsung. And their investment arm is called Samsung Next Ventures. And they also have changed their strategy over time. That they've been around for 10 years, so it's not a short amount of time. They have tried different approaches to add value to their business unit. And right now, they're investing quite autonomously, quite independently from what the business units are doing. So the benefit is they can move faster. And they are investing in very early stage companies, so they don't have to write big checks. They can write small checks, but invest in a lot of companies to get insights and learnings from the new trends like blockchain, NFT. They look at other stuff where Samsung businesses today don't really have a meaningful presence, but could be quite meaningful to Samsung down the road. So that's Samsung Next Ventures.
Very nice. So let me try to understand from your limited partner point of view. Mm-hmm. So Samsung Electronics as Samsung Catalyst, but also an LP of one fund in Samsung Ventures. What was the thinking process to be a LP in two?
So Samsung I think maybe we need to start from who Samsung is. And Samsung is a very, very big organization. And there are so many activities that's taking place. Sometimes it's hard for a single organization to kind of cover everything that needs to be covered. So and when we were making investments, and we still do today, we work fairly closely with the business units to determine our investment candidates. And once they're determined, how to work with them, what kind of partnerships are possible, maybe today or down the road, what type of technologies are needed for our business units. So Samsung Ventures works fairly closely with our business units across all of our LPs. And there's benefit to that approach because we get to make a very strategic investments. But also, it's not easy to be active outside of the areas that our business units are interested in because of that strong tie with the business unit. So Samsung made that was recognized within Samsung, and there was an effort to create an organization that can work more independently, more autonomously, without such tight ties and strings with our business unit, so they can be more, free to be doing more forward-looking stuff that may not indicate any sort of meaningful collaboration opportunities today, but perhaps 2, 3, or 4 years down the road, it could be a meaningful company. So I think that way Samsung try to expand the scope of open innovation beyond the borders of the areas that our business units are very interested in today. So, new organizations were created, and they had the flexibility to invest more independently into areas. So then, collectively between Samsung Ventures and other organizations, Samsung tried to cover a larger space. And inevitably, there will be some overlaps in between, Samsung Next and Ventures and Next and not so much between Next and Catalyst, because they sort of look at separate spaces, but Samsung Ventures and Next, Samsung Ventures and Samsung Catalyst. And so that's why we have these regular meetings with them to coordinate as much as possible internally. And then we try to benefit off of each other's deal flows. And then one of the things that we were talking about is Samsung Next has a large number of very interesting companies in early stage. And then as they're, as they come across collaboration opportunities with the business units, then perhaps Samsung Ventures can come on and take those opportunities as our investment opportunities, and then do a follow-on investment from Samsung's standpoint, and then continue to grow the relationship and partnership.
So you could end up with a startup with a cap table with multiple Samsung Next, Samsung Ventures.
Yes, that's a possibility. It hasn't happened yet. There were a few cases where that could have happened, but until now, it hasn't happened. But I think there is a more possibility that can happen down the road.
I think as your portfolio grows, it's more likely to happen. So maybe, I mean, you talked about the $2.5 billion AUM, which is amazing. But can you talk about the number of funds you've done so far and how many are active, just to give a sense of scale?
Right. Roughly speaking, I don't have the exact count, but the latest fund, so historically, we have created about 60 funds of various sizes. On the smaller end, $20, $30 million small funds to, about $100 million on the larger end. And then, since we've been around for a long time, I would say roughly about half or 60% of them have been returned to the LP. And then we have, in terms of active funds, perhaps I would say roughly about 15 to 20 funds that we are managing actively and investing actively right now. And that spans the businesses that I described earlier, ranging from semiconductors and mobile consumer electronics to construction, ESG, bio and life sciences, and fintech, insurtech. So it's a pretty broad space.
Very nice. And each of these funds is for one LP, which is one business unit of Samsung.
That's right. So we run dedicated funds. So I think some CVCs have pulled money that they invest out of multiple business units. In our case, we decided to go with a dedicated fund approach. It was just simpler and cleaner for us to be investing. When we invest, for example, for our insurance businesses, then we just basically use the fund from our insurance company. And then if it's like a semiconductor investment, then we use the semiconductor fund. That was, in terms of managing multiple funds, there are, perhaps, additional effort that's related to that. But I think the benefit is just clear, like whose money we are using to make what type of investment.
Very nice. And I'm expecting you probably have not just dedicated fund, but dedicated team for each fund. So if it's a bio space, you're not going to have the same people being attached to that fund.
Yes. So within Samsung Ventures, we have 6 investment teams. And so if I were to describe them, we have a team that focuses on semiconductor opportunities. We have a team that focuses on mobile consumer electronics as well as enterprise software space. We have a fintech, insurtech team. We have a team that invests in climate tech and ESG space. We have a bio and life science investment team, as well as a team that focuses on battery solutions, display solutions, and sensors. And so, yeah, that's the 6 teams within today. We have tried different structures, but today we have those teams that look at different space and work with a different set of business units within Samsung.
Very nice. And you mentioned it's a GPLP with carry structure.
Yes.
Does that mean that the investment team for a fund is the one that could get the carry, but not the other investment teams?
It's more so it's not really team based. In our case, it's at the corporate level. All the carries and the fees are collected at the corporate level, and then I think different teams will get different comms based on their performance, but it's more done at the corporate level.
I see. So the distribution is more well distributed.
Yes.
I see. So you mentioned about strategic. So first, maybe I should ask, are your LPs, I mean, they're all different and you have 20 active funds. Do you have some LPs from Samsung that are much more financial motivated? And do you have some where actually they don't care about the financials, they only care about the strategic? Do you have like a spectrum, or they're kind of grouped in the same kind of bucket?
I think from that perspective, although all of our LPs are in different business sectors, when they decided to form a strategic investment fund with Samsung Ventures, they wanted to be deployed strategically. So I would say they have a lot of commonalities there in terms of how they want their fund to be used and deployed. One thing that I want to mention is, in addition to these strategic funds that are dedicated to individual business units, we actually have raised a separate fund from Samsung business units as well as outside of Samsung for Samsung Ventures to use for financial gains. So that was an attempt for Samsung Ventures to grow beyond the strategic investment space, which is quite interesting and can add meaningful value to our business units. But as a VC organization, as a separate investment company organization, we wanted to we thought about what we can do more than just deploy capital strategically. So perhaps we can also, just like other VCs, set up a separate fund, and we talk to different LPs and sometimes outside of Samsung, and to raise this capital and then deploy for financial gains. So it's about roughly, I would say 80 to 90% of our activities are around strategic investment initiatives, but the rest, maybe 10 to 20%, we actually try to deploy these capital in the special fund for financial gains. And that's been an interesting experiment for us.
And so you have one special fund, which is, when did it start?
It started many years ago, over 10 years ago. So I think we are on to number 4.
Oh, okay.
So we've had 3 funds that have been fully deployed. And then I think in the near future, we hope to raise the number 4 fund, the special fund that we can deploy for financial gains.
Very nice. And these special funds are all LPs from Samsung or even outside the Samsung family?
Even outside of Samsung, mainly from all of them from Korea, but we have LPs for this special fund outside of Samsung.
Okay. And so are you involved with that special fund? And how do you communicate that with entrepreneurs? Because entrepreneurs probably think of you as highly strategic.
Yes.
Well, actually, you do have 2 different tools.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So to the entrepreneurs, we whether we invest from strategic funds or from this financially motivated fund, we try to help them in the same way. So to them, it doesn't really probably make much difference which fund we have used to do the investment. Once it becomes our portfolio company, we treat them the same way. We try to look for opportunities within Samsung to work with them. It's the same. I think the difference is whether we can make the investment along with a strategic relationship or independent from strategic relationship. So it's a little bit confusing. We understand that, but from our standpoint, we see it as an additional vehicle that we have at our disposal that we can use when we meet with a company that we think is very interesting, but because we're a strategic investor and we work closely with our business unit, we still have to do the job of convincing our business unit to come on board and support the investment. Sometimes we don't get that 100% of the time. So then, it's nice to have an additional vehicle that we can consider using. So hopefully when the company grows up and becomes a more mature company, the strategic value can be realized then. And if it doesn't, it's still okay for Samsung Ventures because the main purpose of deploying this fund is for financial gains. So I think it's just an added value that an optionality that we have that we can use to add value to our our portfolio companies as well as our business units.
I think it's a golden nugget because you're clearly a strategic investors, but with that special funds on the side, it gives you a bit more flexibility and potential reactivity that you wouldn't necessarily get if you had none of that.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty smart. Now let's talk about strategic value. How do you visualize it? Because actually most of the CVCs I've interviewed, they are typically less than 10 years old. And most of them less than 5, which means that they have yet to prove that strategic value. Starting in 1999, you probably have so many proof points of that strategic value. How do you visualize it and how do you communicate it?
I think the strategic value comes in many different types. The most obvious one is when we make the investment, we typically do a side letter agreement containing strategic terms. So that's most easy to understand and most straightforward to our business unit leaders. When they consider making an investment, like, one of the key questions they ask is, why do I need to make the investment? Why can't I just work with them, partner with them? Why do we have to take the extra step and do the investment? And then, there can be many reasons for that, but the most obvious one that they can see and understand is the side letter strategic terms. And strategic terms can be many different types. It could be related to information around M&A if the company is a very strategically relevant company to Samsung, and if there's an opportunity to potentially acquire the business, then Samsung wants to be part of that conversation. So certain terms are related to that, and sometimes that also helps the startup companies because when they're in that mode, they want as many potential buyers to be included as well. So they would like to have probably Samsung included in that potential buyer group. It could be something around partnership, around R&D or go-to-market, and sometimes it's just a workshop, like informational workshop. And because some of the times we invest to get access to the market that we don't fully understand yet, and we want to see what's going on, what's the latest, and the startups, they're living and breathing the new you market the opportunities every day. So we can try to get similar information from the media through the news, but it's, we get different perspectives if we hear it directly from startup companies. So sometimes it's just that, like a semi-annual workshop to discuss the opportunities for collaboration as well as what they're seeing and sharing of that. Sometimes the strategic value comes in the form of distribution. It could be, and even that can be in different forms. But most commonly, we have spoken to many companies that wanted to be distributed as part of Samsung services on Samsung phones, for example, or Samsung TVs, or other Samsung products. And, so we had a lot of conversations around that. And then, on the enterprise side, we have a company called Samsung SDS, which is, I believe, #1 regional system integrators in Korea. And they basically can take, for example, maybe cybersecurity solutions or other types of enterprise software solutions, and then basically sell that to Samsung affiliates globally or other Korean enterprise or government customers in Korea. And that's an added benefit to the startup company, because normally Korea is not the first go-to-market place for many startup companies. They think about US first, and then maybe Europe, and then other countries. So if somebody like Samsung SDS, which is a pretty respectable brand in Korea, can help them, expand market share, get new business within Samsung, to SDS's captive customer base, and outside of Samsung in Korea, then that's a pretty nice option and benefit for startup companies.
Yeah, I can see the go-to-market and accelerating it really being highly valuable. Now, if I look at your limited partners, what is the one thing that they come back to saying, that one was really strategic for me, that was highly valuable? What type of example is it? Is it more like an M&A? Is it more like learning where not to go, or learning where to go?
Since we've been around for a long time, I think there are many examples that gets quoted when we have internal discussions about strategic investments. Sometimes it's M&As. We have so our business units have made a number of M&As in the display space, and some of them were our portfolio companies. And then when we made the investment, it wasn't clear if our business unit needed to make the acquisition or not, but they wanted to start with a small amount of capital to be deployed as investment, and then that actually gets us further into building a good relationship with the company beyond just POCs or commercial relationship. And that gives us better visibility on how they're doing and how the team's been executing, how they're developing their technology, and then gives us more conviction over time that this team is the best in the industry. We should seriously consider acquiring them as part of Samsung's technology portfolio. So there were many cases like that. On the acquisition side, another one is we have invested in a company in the media space, and this was related to our TV group, and they have now a pretty fast-growing service called Samsung TV Plus, which is a free ad-supported TV offering on Samsung TVs. And basically what this is if you have if the TV is connected to the internet, then without any cable subscriptions or TV subscriptions, you can watch a lot of channels. I think there's maybe over 100 channels that you can watch across different genres for free, just like you would watch TVs in the old days. So it's not really on demand, but it's linear channels, lean back experience, and you just tune to different channels and you watch comedies, lifestyles, news, any type of sports channels and things like that. So this media company they were looking at various platforms to provide their channels. And then from Samsung's perspective, we have a platform that we wanted to grow, but we needed content. We need content partners. So it was a really good fit, and there was a lot of synergy. And this company still provides, I think maybe what I heard is maybe around 20 to 30 different channels on Samsung TV Plus platforms, and their business is growing very fast off of Samsung, TV Plus's platform, and we are also getting a lot of high quality content. So that was a pretty good, strategic outcome, and that all started with the investment discussion. So it was. That would be one example on the partnership side. We have, as I mentioned, a number of examples on the M&A side. And then there's a lot of examples on the eyes and ears. We do a lot of investments in early stage companies for that purpose, mainly for that purpose, to see how they grow and how they perform. And then we want to keep them close so that once they hit certain milestones, we want to work with them closely. So we have a lot of those investments. So yeah, I think based on our volume, as I mentioned, we do like around 80 to 90 deals a year. So over time, over 20 years,
that's a lot. Yes,
over thousands of companies, and we had many good examples.
Very interesting. So one thing you mentioned is that sometimes you do go and have Samsung acquire some of your portfolio companies. Does that create some kind of signal when you invest in a new startup to the rest of the market that you may acquire the company? And how do you handle the messaging around it?
I think it could. It could be seen that way by other companies, and perhaps they can think, and it's a possibility, because the way we work, the way we invest involves a lot of close conversations with our business units, and we only do investments in companies that are very relevant strategically to our business unit. So it's certainly a possibility. And I think, so, if we want to, hide the fact that we are investing in a certain company, then, we don't have to announce the deal. There's that option, but a lot of times we are okay announcing our deals. And, we work, actually, surprisingly, we co-invest quite a lot with our peers. On the semiconductor side, we invest a lot with like Intel Capital, for example, Qualcomm Ventures. On the mobile consumer electronics side, we have quite a few co-investments with LG, for example.
Well, one of our portfolio companies, Vureol, we invested, you invested, and LG invested.
Right. So surprisingly, there's quite a bit of collaboration amongst different CVC arms of different companies, more so than their actual businesses. Possibly, influenced by this atmosphere in the Silicon Valley ecosystem, venture capital, startup ecosystem, where there's just a lot of collaboration, and that leads to innovations and interesting ideas, new business opportunities. So I think and CVC investors, just like our peers on the traditional VC side, we want to be a good player in this ecosystem. We want to add value. So I think, generally speaking, there is a lot of collaboration and goodwill.
Very nice. Can we talk a little bit about your team structure at Samsung Ventures? You mentioned you have 6 investment teams, but I'm sure you have non-investment team as well, who actually also engage with the Samsung teams. What kind of ratio between the investment team and the rest of the team, and how are they structured?
So roughly speaking, we have maybe 3 different groups within Samsung Ventures. We have people like myself working overseas outside of Korea. primarily on the investment side, on the portfolio management side. We have investment teams in Korea that's based in our headquarter office that's working closely with our portfolio companies as well as our business units who are mainly based out of Korea. And then we have people in IT, for example, in HR, legal, accounting, finance, compliance. They all sit in Korea because they have to deal with the relevant organizations within Korea. So roughly that, some CVCs have a separate support team, independent from the investment team.
Yep.
In our case, the investment team sort of, is tasked to do everything from the investment, and then so it's not like we make the investment and then we hand it off to the operation team or the support team for them to handle the business relationship with our business unit colleagues. But it's on us, the investment professionals, to continue working with the company after investment, post-investment, to help them navigate Samsung, help them identify opportunities to engage with Samsung, partnership opportunities. And sometimes, because Samsung is such a large organization, when a small company works with Samsung, there can be some, a lot of questions. Questions arise because of cultural differences and expectation differences and many other reasons. So we try to work with that. We try to facilitate as much as possible to explain what's going on, try to provide some visibility so that, a lot of times it's not an issue, but it's just misunderstanding from both parties. We try to, bridge that as much as possible. It's all on the investment team. We don't have a separate operations or portfolio, support team.
So I find this very interesting because you're providing the entrepreneurs an end-to-end relationship. You start with them and you continue supporting them even after the investment.
Yes, that's true.
And so, but of course, the drawback to that is probably you end up with so many portfolio companies over time you invest in that you still have to support. So how do you manage the scaling part?
So that's the challenge. And sometimes we end up with a lot of portfolio companies and we get stretched too thin across so many companies. For me, at one point, I had over 20 companies that I had to manage and work with. So that was just like not really practical now, not working out. Now it's down to 6. So, I think what helps us to manage our activities and support for the companies is the structure that we have. So we have dedicated funds for our LPs, and then they have finite lifetimes. So at certain point, we have to find an exit and liquidate our assets to return capital. And this is very similar to other institutional VCs. So it's not like if we were to have like an evergreen fund, then we may have a lot of portfolio companies just beyond our control, and we end up hiring a lot. In that case, we may have to hire a separate support team
and restructure.
Yes. In our case, it's sort of capped at certain level. And then we have actually grown our team over time. So, when I joined about 10 years ago, I think the overall headcount Samsung Ventures was, I think, less than 50, including, the back office people in IT, in finance and legal. Now it's double that over 10 years. So we have grown our AUM, and naturally our portfolio company numbers have also grown. And then we have actually hired more people to do more. So there's that. And then there's the effect of, when we return the fund to our LPs, we have to find an exit for many of our portfolio companies. So that also reduces the number of our portfolio companies.
That makes sense. So let's go back 10 years ago when you joined. What advice you wish you had at the time you joined?
That's a good question. Let's see. I think many advices. A lot of learnings over the past 10 years. I think one thing is, so the main challenge for organizations like Samsung Ventures that work very closely with the business units to make the investment happen is, the biggest challenge is convincing the business unit that they need to take the extra step and make the investment. I think I underestimated how much effort that will take. And sometimes there's good and bad from that approach, but the challenges are there's unpredictability because there's a lot of things going on at all times in the business unit, and making investment is not their top priority. At almost all times, it's not their top priority. So sometimes it gets delayed, sometimes it gets changed, the decision gets changed, a lot of uncertainties. So, if you have a really strong relationship and if you know a lot of people and if you have their respect and trust, then it makes the job quite easy, much better. So that you can actually foresee better what's going to happen. You can foresee potential challenges down the road, so you can try to manage them in advance, so that you can run the process more efficiently, which benefits everybody, the startups, our business unit, and the Samsung Ventures as well. So yeah, having a strong relationship with the people inside the business unit, quite useful. What else? Yeah, I think that would be the most important thing.
The biggest advice.
Biggest advice that I would give myself.
Very nice.
Network harder with the business unit people.
Much more upfront. Okay.
Yes.
So one thing you've kind of said multiple times, but I think it's worth pausing and double clicking, is the value of partnering with other VCs and CVCs. Can you talk to us about why this matters so much?
I think that's very important part of our job at CVC. And that's one of the reasons why we are doing this, to
exactly
share more about our experiences to the wider audience and to the people outside of CVC to better understand us. It's a team effort at the end of the day. When we do a round, when we make an investment, we don't do it ourselves. It's together with other VCs. And not just institutional VCs, but other corporate VCs as well. Mm-hmm. And realistically speaking, sometimes there is a conflict between, different CVCs, and mainly stemming from the businesses, not really from the CVC organizations, but from the motherships that the CVC organizations support. And because of that, there's some conflict. But a lot of times it's more beneficial down the road to join forces and then do this as a team effort, so that you can have provide stronger support to the startups. And at the end of the day, it's the startups that matter. If the startup fails, then everything fails. Like the investment fails, the partnership opportunities, strategic rationale, they all fail if the startup fails. So, I think one of the most important thing is to increase the chance of success, so that investors will benefit, CVCs will benefit, and the supporting business units will also benefit from the partnership and collaboration. And one way, the easiest way to increase that chance of success is collaboration between different investors, even including CVCs. And and CVCs, I think, are unique because we provide capital, but there are other stuff, other additional values that we can provide on top of the capital. So if we can do that well, then and together, and it's gonna be quite synergistic and quite meaningful to the startup community. So I think that's one reason why collaboration is encouraged. And I think there's actually a lot of collaboration. Recently there was a CVC summit down in San Diego, and a lot of other CVC folks were invited to share ideas and deal flows and perspectives. So the more we do that, I think it's good for the ecosystem, for CVCs themselves, and people around it.
Yeah. We can give a shout out to Qualcomm Ventures for that event. They really do it well.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about follow investment. So you've decided to invest in a portfolio of companies. They go to their next round of funding. How do you think about the follow investment? Does it still have the same strategic weighting, or this becomes much more of a financial discipline?
So, to be upfront about follow-on investments, it's the piece that we're still trying to figure out. Um, I think especially for organizations like Samsung Ventures that work closely and depend on business unit to make the investment decision, it could be an easier question if you're an independent CVC, autonomous CVC, then you can would be easier to do a follow-on investment. But for somebody like us, convincing our business unit to do a follow-on after the initial investment is much more challenging. And so we still need to educate them the value of follow-on investments and value to be able to continuously support our portfolio companies and startups and strategic partners. But in the business unit, as you know, there are many management changes over time, and then there's education over education and new education for the new folks. So to date, doing a follow investment and building a rationale to justify that internally within Samsung is not an easy thing. But by case, actually, we do. It's not like we don't do any follow investments, but it's just hard to do, much harder to do. So we do some of them, but not a lot.
I see. So in a way, the way to answer is that even the follow investment is a strategic decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It a lot of times requires a separate rationale. So the initial strategic rationale that we used for the initial investment, we cannot reuse that. We have to come up with a new
wow, this is a
rationale.
very high bar.
Yeah. So if we can come up with something like that, then we can get the support and blessing to do the follow-on. But
I see.
So that's the challenge we have.
Okay. Now let's move into the future. Let's say the next 6 to 12 months. What are you excited to invest in? And here I'm thinking about the audience of entrepreneurs as well.
Mm-hmm.
What it is that you want to invest next?
So since we cover at Samsung Ventures, we cover such a wide scope of areas. There's a lot of areas, but I spend most of my time around mobile, consumer electronics, and software space. So I can speak to those business units more specifically and what they're looking at. They're looking at many things, but a few things that I would like to highlight. One is AI, machine learning. That's having more and more implications to our business, our products, and what our products can do for people around smart homes, smart devices. And running a lot of AI on the edge takes a lot of effort and resources. So we are all about trying to minimize that, to squeeze in as much intelligence as possible on Samsung devices. So that's one. Another thing that I would like to highlight is Samsung is getting actually more active around the theme of ESG and climate tech. And recently there was a Samsung developer conference in San Francisco where our vice chairman came and announced that the net zero goal by 2030. So there is a lot of effort internally, and this is new. We haven't really had this maybe 5-6 years ago, but last year, a couple of years ago, and this year it's getting stronger and stronger. So we are increasingly more looking at recyclable materials, eco-friendly materials that can self degrade, will have minimal impact on the environment, that we can use for our packaging or our products. So that's a new area of focus for us that we haven't really invested a lot, but we are talking to many companies in that space as well.
Very nice. Jihong, thank you for your time with us and sharing all your learnings along the way and about Samsung Ventures and how it's organized. I think it will be helpful for so many people who want to engage with you and co-invest. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and inviting me. Appreciate it.